By now, you've probably heard of the mass layoffs that have happened. But what you haven't heard are of the mass layoffs that are coming. Millions of people are going to be affected by this, and it's not just down to one set of factors. It's down to several different things all at once, whether it's companies laying off workers due to higher wage demands, higher taxes that they need to pay, not generating enough profit, and so on. We're going to take a look at all of this because, of course, if businesses start to go under and people start getting laid off, it spells bad news for the economy and indeed for the future of the country. So we'll take a look at all of this, but before we do, if it takes just 2 seconds, if you enjoy this video and you enjoy these kind of updates, please do consider hitting the like and subscribe button down below. And without further ado, let's get into it. And this isn't a problem that's just unique to Britain, by the way. The same thing is happening in the United States and in the European Union as well. So we'll take a look at what's happening in those two areas too, but to begin with, let's see what's happening in the UK. Shoezone is closing down several of their stores around the UK, laying off many people all at the same time. If you thought that was bad, look at this. Bad news if you're in the UK. Over 200,000 employees are set to lose their jobs in 2025. And the Prime Minister Keir Starmer may have to take the blame. Now those of course are very specific to the UK because you saw there, it's mentioned that Keir Starmer and the government have been responsible for putting up the business rates, which in turn is now causing a lot of these businesses to lay off their workers because the cost of running the business has increased. If they have to pay more in wages, if they have to pay more to the government, then in order to stay alive, they're going to have to look at a way of either generating more money or putting in place cost-cutting measures. Sadly, it appears to be the latter, because at the moment, not as many people are going out to buy things. Shops all along the UK high street suffered during Boxing Day because shoppers elected to stay home as opposed to go out and spend their money. So if customers aren't spending their money, businesses aren't generating the revenue, hence people are getting laid off as a result. If increasing the business rates leads to many people getting laid off and businesses having to close down because they simply cannot afford to stay open, because the cost of running the business has increased dramatically, then the government and the Prime Minister will indeed have a lot to answer for, because putting a policy in place like this, where you say to businesses, we want you to grow, but we're going to tax you before you've had the chance to grow, so you can't invest as much because your money is coming to us. It doesn't necessarily marinate together because they are two opposites. If you want businesses to grow, then they need the money to invest in their efficiency, their workforce, their equipment, etc. But if you're taking more of that money as the government, well, what cash do businesses have left in order to invest and grow? You know, the two things don't go hand in hand. Yes, absolutely, tax business as they get to higher and higher levels, but when you're trying to kickstart them into growth, taxing them before they've even had the chance to grow, I think is a recipe for disaster. But this next one is where things get very interesting for me. Take a look at this. The car company Ford announced 4,000 job cuts in Europe recently after there was a significant slowdown in electric car sales. Now, for those who don't know, there is currently a mandate in place where after 2030, all new cars, brand new cars, have to be either electric or hybrid. They can't be petrol or diesel. There's a complete ban on those after 2030. So every brand new car after that point has to be electric or hybrid. But this is where things start to get very interesting, because after they've said that there's a slowdown in electric car sales, Ford are now risking a £100 million fine for not meeting the electric car goals amid the struggle to scrap petrol and diesel. And this is what troubles me, because how on earth can someone be expected to meet the targets if the demand just isn't there? If you were going to sell 100 pairs of shoes, a brand new type of shoe, you said, oh, I'm going to sell 90 of these shoes in the next week or so. No customers turn up. The demand just isn't there. You can't force people to buy something that they don't want. If people don't want electric cars, then why is Ford now being slapped with a £100 million fine, which could also very well have an impact on more layoffs to come for Ford as well? Because if they have to, cost cut as a result of this fine, then they can't allocate that money towards their workers. And if they can't allocate it towards the workers, layoffs. I mean, it's just astonishing to me. It's staggering. And it's not as if Ford haven't invested heavily in electric vehicles. They have. Have a read of this. We need your best ideas to drive cost reduction, even if they have been previously rejected by Ford. says the Ford chief supply chain officer. Quote, "We have all invested heavily in the success of the electric vehicle business, and we will all win or lose together." This was a letter that they wrote to their suppliers, asking them for their ideas and their help on how to cut costs. So Ford are facing the prospect of being punished for not selling enough electric cars, despite investing heavily and going all in on selling electric cars. Yeah, look, the world is a strange place sometimes. I can't comment on that because that is, like I said before, that's just baffling to me. So, putting the UK to one side, let's now take a look at what's happening on the other side of the pond. What's going on in America? Well, it doesn't look like America will be exempt from this either, because it looks like layoffs will indeed be coming to the US jobs market in 2025. But let's pause for a moment and let's review 2024, because believe me, there were definitely some highlights. Over 100,000 IT jobs were cut in the second half of last year. Not even across the full year. In 6 months, 100,000 jobs were lost. The biggest privately owned company in the United States, Cargill, is cutting thousands of jobs equivalent to 5% of its workforce. Chegg is cutting 21% of its employees as AI searches are destroying its business model. Blimey, that's a thought, isn't it? An AI is in the process of taking down a business simply because you can ask the AI for the answers and it will give it to you. You don't have to pay the business like Chegg anymore to get the answers. That's another story in and of itself. But this is the one that's most interesting to me because back in November, Boeing announced that they were going to lay off 17,000 workers amidst their financial struggles. But if you take a look at this one, they've since added another 5,000 layoffs to that number. So now they're going to lay off 22,000 workers. Now, Boeing's case is quite interesting because, of course, with the number of people that are being laid off, it's a sad state of affairs, and it is a sorry sight to see so many people lose their jobs all at once, all at the same time. But it's not just the employees that are feeling the effect of this, it's the suppliers too. When Boeing employees were going on strike, Boeing suppliers were fearing long-term job cuts from the Boeing strikes. Now, it's an indirect connection, but have a look at this. Boeing's 2-week-old strike forced aerospace supplier Pathfinder Manufacturing to furlough 14 of the company's 54 employees, so it's a pretty small firm compared to a firm like Boeing. The CEO, Dave Trader, feared that he may need to send more home if the stoppage continued on. So clearly, what happens at Boeing has a massive impact on the suppliers. Now, Boeing are laying off workers in an effort to try and save money. But with that saving money, they may not be able to spend as much with their suppliers, meaning their suppliers are now making less money. And if they then have to go on a cost-cutting spree because they're not generating as much money or even generating a profit because Boeing sales have slumped, then they may also need to then go on a layoff spree as well, meaning the layoffs at Boeing are impacting the layoffs at the suppliers. So it's a chain reaction in that sense. So just as a final thought, just to wrap all of this up, it looks like, whether it's the UK or the US, the landscape of the economies in 2025 will look very, very different. Whether we have more companies going under, more people being made redundant, people having less money in their pockets because either they're not working or they're being taxed to ridiculous levels, that all remains to be seen. But quite clearly, this is a problem that's affecting the whole of the Western world at the minute, and probably even beyond that as well. So it's very likely we will end up seeing some form of economic slump, if we're not seeing that already. But it's a long year, and that's what we know as of today. So, until further notice, thank you all for watching. Please do consider liking and subscribing if you enjoyed this video. Drop a comment down below, let me know your thoughts on the whole situation. I'd love to hear from all of you. But, until next time, see you all later, and take care.